and it would be something I'd be doing, years later, but here I am. A couple of the other things I did along the way, I think really helped inform where I am today, why I eventually chose this field and what we're doing here in Kitsap is that, I worked in some other areas of that field. I did some early intervention work with children who were at risk or experiencing developmental delays. Worked with adults with developmental disabilities in a program at City Colleges of Chicago. Did that for a number of years. And I also did a lot of mentoring along the way of youth. And what happened was I eventually found out that working in the library was more than just books. It was more than just a place where you could go and have some quiet time and absorb information. And so, I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir, and some of you know what libraries are, but there is this notion, I think, from people, this romanticized notion that the libraries are really a place of, it's a noise sanctuary, right? It's a place you can go and have some solitude and you can get some knowledge. And it can be that, but it's also a place where we see a pretty wide swath of the community. And so I think that's the piece where we really fit in talking about resources for unhoused individuals. And so what I found out is that once I made the career switch and started working for a library full time, was there are a lot of other things I had to grapple with. And, one of the things I think my career in social services helped me to realize is that I had some skill sets to bring in right away to deal with some of the things I was seeing. And it was a lot of, unhoused individuals and, associated things that were along with that. But specifically what I found is that libraries are on the front lines for a lot of what we see in society. Unhoused individuals, folks who are experiencing abuse, folks who are experiencing, mental deterioration for one reason or another. You name it, we've experienced it. And so it's a big part of what happens in libraries today, particularly public libraries. And so I felt like I was really equipped to do the job that I was doing coming in. And really probably the most salient thing that a library can give you is shelter. And so libraries are, somebody mentioned Costco earlier. I love Costco, but you've got to show a Costco membership to get into Costco. You don't have to show your library card to get into a library, of course. You don't even need to own a library card to use our facilities. And so what happens when you have unhoused individuals who are out during the day, where do they go? We see a lot of those individuals, and that's not untrue of many other cities across the country. Specifically, my experience in Chicago, especially around the Central Library, is that there were a number of homeless shelters that were within, a couple miles of the library. And so what happened is they couldn't be at the homeless shelter in the day, needed a place to go. And so, folks would be lined up at the top of the hour from when the library opened at 9 a.m. to be able to get in and utilize the resources. That's a very good patron base that our staff have to work with. Some are there using the library for its intended purpose for, research, for knowledge acquisition, for, studying, using music rooms and the like. And some are using it just to get out of the cold, and that's fine. Libraries, most of our libraries can serve as warming and cooling shelters just because of the fact that, we do have temperature controlled environments. And so that's a big part of what libraries have been and continue to be across the country. Whenever there are weather emergencies, libraries can be used as shelters in a lot of instances. And most of our locations here can be double as shelters for unhoused individuals. The other things really, I think that we can, once you get into the space, there are services, because one of the things you find is that when you have people who are in your space, you have all sorts of needs that need to be filled. And so we have information professionals like Priya and, Lisa and her staff that are equipped to be able to, disseminate that knowledge and to be able to access those resources, to be able to help people when they are in need. Because, it's one thing to be in that space, but it's another thing to have needs that aren't being met. And one of the things the libraries always have been is a place that typically in this country, maybe not so much in others, libraries are a trusted place because it is for the most part, it's not seen as a governmental entity. And so people feel like they trust their library professionals. And so that when they come in, there isn't this need that, there isn't this thinking that, they're going to be penalized. They're going to have the authorities called on them for whatever reason or another. So libraries are safe spaces too, not only their needs are. Once you're in the space, obviously the free Wi-Fi is a big service that we provide. And that's huge because people who don't have internet access and don't have Wi-Fi, this is huge. Free printing is amazing to be able to go in, use a public computer as well. Especially we've seen in the pandemic, there's a need for people to access services. And how are you going to do that? Either you have your device and you're connecting to the internet, or you're coming in and using our devices to be able to apply for benefits or apply for jobs, get to a job interview, you name it. We have facilities and we have technology that people can access, especially in a 21st century library. And that's a big part of what libraries are today. And then assisting folks in navigating local resources. And that's the part where I really want to, sort of end my talk here and talking about couple things really. The library as a place, as an organism, and really three things: the people, because without the people who have sort of an ability to work with all sorts of individuals, libraries wouldn't work. And so, part of the piece of having a facility and having a technology is having already a built-in infrastructure to be able to help people. The other piece is, and I mentioned this earlier, while I may have had some training in terms of and experiences dealing with multiple populations of individuals, not all of our library staff have. They've gained that experience from working in libraries, but people aren't, cut from this cloth necessarily coming out of library school if they're a librarian, or even if they're an assistant or an associate. Typically, people go to school for things like English and the like to wind up into this field. But what happens is we're often dealt with lots of other societal issues that are happening. And as I said earlier, libraries on the front lines of that. We've experienced increased needs for basic human services throughout the pandemic. So we have this ability to have a space where we can leverage our space and our technology and our people to be able to assist people. The other piece really is the partnerships, and that's the piece where I'm really kind of leaning into, because without partnerships that make the other services available, and having a knowledge of those services, and then utilizing those partners to be able to make those services known, we wouldn't be of much help. And so part of it also is to leverage our partnerships with important entities, many of you who are on this call, to be able to help make those services available. So what does your 21st century look like in the last 5 minutes or so that I have? I think that's still to be defined. I mean, I think for the most part, what's happening in libraries right now is sort of a push and pull against what libraries have been and what they are becoming, and eventually what we will be. Obviously there's a change in how information and even books are accessed. Lots of people access their print materials either via Libby, they're buying their books via Amazon, and or they are just outright buying digital copies for their digital devices. Yeah, we have a lot of bibliophiles who, like me, I like to turn pages. I like to have my books in my hand. So libraries are complex organisms. There's a lot happening, and it's more than just books. We have a suite of digital resources. We have our spaces where we have meeting rooms. We have important library staff who go out and do programs in the community. Everything from, to the library programming to, you name it, standard book clubs. I've seen lots of things happen in libraries. I've seen crocheting happen. I've seen music programs. I've seen people playing ukulele in libraries. But the important thing about that is that libraries have been nimble enough to be able to adapt services over time. And we have to continue to do that. And one of the things that I'm proud of is that our folks are willing to partner with organizations to be able to figure out where the needs are and be able to, fill a need. And that need right now is, I think, more so than anything, it's that empathy piece and be able to leverage our spaces to be able to give people a safe space to come. And there's so many threats that are out here for people. There's a reduced number of housing units in Kitsap County right now. I've read all about the crisis of the housing market here in general, and the affordability of available apartment units. And so I think for us right now, even more so, we have to leverage our spaces to be able to provide some safe spaces some that are able to give people what they need in that space, because we can give you what we have, but what we can't give you, obviously, that we're not equipped to give you, we can't give you all the other parts that you may need to make yourself whole. And so that's where other organizations come in. I'm proud that we have a staff that's willing to fill that need. And I think that's really what a 21st century library looks like. It's a multi-use space. We are de facto homeless shelters. And I just want to get that out there. I'm going to say it because a lot of people don't associate libraries and homeless shelters, but we are de facto, just like we're de facto classrooms too. We see children after school. We see homeless individuals during the day and sometimes through the evening. We are that place for a lot of different parts of the community. So I'm really proud about the services that we're able to provide, and I hope that still a need. I hope there's never a need in the future that we would even need to be a shelter in a place that people need to come into to feel safe. But unfortunately, society is not constructed that way at this point. So I'm glad libraries are on the front lines of democracy, always have been, and I'm proud of our staff like Lisa and Priya and the countless others who've worked for Kitsap Regional Library. We've got about 185 staff or so. They're all phenomenal at what they do. And as I've learned really the tapestry of this county, one of the things I've learned is that this is a community that cares and it wraps its arms around the people who are most at need. So I'm really happy to be a part of a community like that. It's been amazing to be here for the past year, and I hope to dig in further to help fill the voids where necessary. Thanks for having me out today, Lisa. Really appreciate you, and I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. That was a great snapshot of library information. Well put. And thanks for all the compliments to me and Priya. Just kidding.
It's well deserved, Lisa. It's well deserved. I've seen you guys in action.
To the library, everyone. All right, we're gonna shift gears, and I just want to thank Kirsten Jewell for giving us like a state of housing and homelessness in Kitsap. She is the most knowledgeable. Thank you for doing this, Kirsten, and I'm gonna hand it over to you. Let me know if you need any support.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, Lisa. Can somebody give me a hands up? They can hear me? Yes, okay, great, thank you. We've been having a little internet troubles today, so hopefully that will stick with us. As Lisa said, my name is Kirsten Jewell, and I manage the Housing and Homelessness Division for Kitsap County. I have had the great honor and pleasure of working in Kitsap County on housing and homelessness issues for coming up on 18 years. It is amazing how much has changed in that time, including how many of you have changed in your roles. So when Lisa asked me to give a presentation on kind of the state of homelessness, I thought a lot about what I could fit into a relatively short period of time. There is a lot to talk about, as you all know. And so what I'm showing you today is kind of like a buffet of information, I like to think of it. So it's a little bit of information about a bunch of different topics and things that related to homelessness. I could certainly give a long presentation on any one of them. I'm going to start with some pretty basic information because I do know that there are quite a few of you on the call that are relatively new in your position, maybe since the pandemic started or even since then. And so, forgive me for telling some of you things that you probably already know, but I'd love to get everybody kind of up to speed and at least with some basic information about my perspectives and perceptions of what's happening with homelessness in Kitsap County right now. So let's look at some screen sharing. Fantastic. I don't mind questions at all, but I can't really see anybody who has their hand raised when I'm sharing my screen. So maybe for the purposes of this presentation, it'd be great to wait till the end and I can close my presentation and then I can see who's asking questions. And I absolutely love questions, so don't hesitate. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about homelessness data, causes of homelessness. I'm going to talk some about the kind of new housing initiatives that the county's been working on. I'm going to spend a little time talking about the South Kitsap Shelter Project because that's something I want to highlight, and then definitely have time for questions. So our division has 4 primary responsibilities. Most of these are mandated by state legislation. The way the state legislation works is typically the state legislature passes laws that direct counties to have a specific role in homelessness for the entire county. And we work really closely with cities within the county as do other counties across the state. So our responsibilities include doing strategic planning. So we're required to have a homeless housing plan. We work with the Continuum of Care, the Housing Coalition here really closely, periodically to do updates to our homeless crisis response and housing plan. And we have a variety of different community input methods to focus groups with people with lived experience of homelessness, to talk to elected officials, to talk to the public, to talk to service providers, and all of that information goes into the development of a plan. We get grants from federal, state, and local sources, and we invest that funding into our local nonprofit provider community to carry out the strategies that we've identified in our homeless housing plan. And then we gather and report on the success in those investments. How are we doing at addressing homelessness? And I'm going to share some of that data in just a minute. And then we have a role around coordinating community efforts. Sometimes this looks like our support kind of from the behind of the Housing Coalition. Sometimes this is coordinating or facilitating specific work groups on topics like veterans homelessness or youth homelessness, or participating in various different community groups that are working on homelessness and housing issues. So one of the questions I get asked most frequently is how many people are experiencing homelessness in Kitsap County? And most of you are probably aware that we do an annual point-in-time count. This is a federal and state requirement that every 4th Thursday in January, we go out and try to survey as many people experiencing unsheltered homelessness as we can find. People who are staying in shelters and transitional housing are surveyed through those programs. But we have a large group of community volunteers who fan out during a few days and go to food banks and meal sites and go work with outreach professionals to find as many people as they can out living in encampments and woods and cars. Also have these awesome Project Connect events. Many of you participated in those. We weren't able to do those for the last couple of years, but we're back. And the events went off just beautifully with a great planning committee working on the Project Connect events and many of your organizations participating. One of the reasons that we do those events is to bring people in to survey them for our point-in-time count. We know that the point-in-time count misses people. We don't find everybody. Not everybody wants to take our survey. And so it's definitely an undercount. And we use the information gathered as a benchmark, like this is the minimum number of people experiencing homelessness in our community at that time. We sort of take the data with a grain of salt. The other way that we collect information about people experiencing homelessness in our community is through the Homeless Management Information System. This is also a federal and state requirement that every person who is receiving the benefit of any public funding for homelessness has information entered into a database called the Homeless Management Information System. And this database collects information that's both demographic about that household and their composition, their race, their age, things like that. And it also collects information programmatically. So it tracks what programs people are getting enrolled in, how long they stay in those programs, and what happens when they leave those programs. And we use that for our performance measurement for program success. And it allows this sophisticated analysis of a lot of different data about who's experiencing homelessness and how well the programs that we're funding to work on ending homelessness are doing at achieving their goals. So through that information, we can find out things like in our 2022 point in time count survey, we found 183 people who were living without shelter on that one night, that fourth Thursday in January. We have not yet compiled our 2023 point in time count data. Corey is going to be working on that, and it's a huge amount of effort to unduplicate surveys and make sure we have all the information we need, and it takes him a good month to get it all entered into the database, and then it gets submitted to the state and they unduplicate it across counties in case we accidentally counted somebody twice, and then it gets compiled, and then it gets aggregated and sent up to the state. We also know through our Housing Solutions Center, which I'll talk about in a minute, through the Homeless Management Information System, that actually, this should be in 2022. It says 2021 at the bottom of the page, but it's actually 2022. In 2022, we had 1,700 households were experiencing homelessness or housing instability and requesting assistance. 1,100 of those were what we would consider to be literally homeless. They were in desperate need of a place to go imminently. And 479 of those households had children under the age of 18. We have a lot of other data about the composition of households and characteristics of people experiencing homelessness and housing instability on our website. And I will give you that website address at the end. There's statistics that we compile every quarter that you're welcome to dig into if you want more information. And so what this translates to is that we estimate that about 1 in every 258 people who live in Kitsap County experience unsheltered homelessness in 2022. And so if you think about, you know, if you go to a sports event with your child, or you attend any kind of event that has a couple of hundred people there, you kind of get this sense of like, wow, this is not an uncommon situation for people to experience homelessness. And most people experience homelessness for a relatively short period of time. Our data shows that most people, the vast majority of people, are homeless for less than a month before finding some kind of housing solution. And then a very small proportion of people are homeless for a year or more. So this is sort of like over the course of a year, 1 in every 158 people experienced homelessness. They are likely to not be homeless still. But that gives you a sense of how prevalent it is in our community. The other question that I really commonly get asked is, why are we seeing so many people experiencing homelessness? It seems like to most of us that we are seeing a big increase in visible homelessness in our community, but also we might make a trip across the water to one of our cities, Tacoma or Seattle or Olympia. And so the question that a lot of us are wondering is, why are we seeing homelessness increase so much, particularly over the last 10 years or so? And I think it's important to consider that all of the research that we have to help us understand this problem really shows that homelessness is primarily an economic problem that is compounded by the breakdown of our social systems. So when I first started doing this work many years ago, we didn't have any research. We didn't know why people were homeless. We didn't know who was homeless. We didn't know what worked to help people regain stable housing. And now there's like research arms at major universities dedicated to researching homelessness. And there's a ton of amazing research out there that takes that HMIS data and other social data, the census data, all of that kind of gets wrapped into these studies. And the conclusion of all of them really is that this is primarily a social problem, an economic problem compounded by the breakdown of social systems and our social safety net. And what that looks like is something that I'm sure all of you, seems obvious to all of you, but I wanted to kind of lay it out for you in the equation here. We've seen the cost of housing dramatically increase before the pandemic, for the 5 years before the pandemic, we saw the cost of rental housing increase about 10% every year, so a total of 40%. And then during the pandemic, there was this eviction moratorium and landlords were not allowed to raise rents. So we saw the rent curve kind of flatten during the pandemic because people weren't allowed to raise rents. And then since the pandemic, that sort of moratorium came to an end, we've seen rents dramatically increasing again as landlords sort of try to catch up with rent increases. And so, you know, nobody that I know has seen their incomes increase at that same rate as the cost of housing has increased, not to mention inflation making everything cost more. And then, you know, wages have generally not kept up with the cost of housing. So I say here wages are stagnant. That's not exactly true. We have seen some wage increase, but they have not in anywhere near kept up with the cost of housing. And I could cite a lot of statistics for you about this, but just as an example, in Washington State has the highest minimum wage in the country at $14.49, and a one-bedroom apartment in Kitsap County last year averaged, you would have to make $26.31 to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment. So there's just this enormous gap between the cost of housing and incomes. And this is compounded by the sort of economic reality of the supply and demand curve, which when we don't have enough housing, that drives up the cost of housing. So we don't have enough housing in our county or in our state, period. Estimates range anywhere from 100,000 to 120,000 shortage of housing units, affordable and market rate. And that's across the state. And then we see this also in Kitsap County. We literally do not have enough beds for every head. So there are not enough housing units in Kitsap County to house everybody who is living here now and to accommodate the influx of population that we are seeing as people from other parts of the country and the state decide that Kitsap County is the place that they want to live. So once displaced, once you've lost your housing, if your landlord raises your rent and then you are, lose your lease and you're out in the market trying to find another place to live, it is extremely difficult to find another place that is affordable for most people. And there are huge barriers to finding housing, again, once you've experienced homelessness for any length of time and you have any other issues that have come up for you during that time. So I often refer to this as the classic musical chairs problem. If you played this game as a kid, everybody runs around the chairs and the music stops and you try to grab a chair. In the housing market, what this looks like is there's a limited number of housing units, and the people who are the poorest and the most vulnerable and have the most challenges in life are the ones who don't get a chair or don't get a housing unit, and they're the ones who get kind of squeezed out of the market because they're not able to compete in the housing market, and they're the ones who end up homeless and generally on the street. So again, I'm sorry I'm blowing through all of this really quickly. There's a lot to be said about all of it, but I just wanted to give you all a kind of a high-level overview. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is what is our community doing now to help people move out of homelessness? And I always like to pause here and say, I'm a person who loves data and numbers and statistics, and I know that that's interesting to many of us, but it's really important to think about the fact that, behind every single one of those statistics, that 1 in every 258 or that 15,000 households who, are on the brink of homelessness, those are all individual people. And these are our parents, our neighbors, our sons, our daughters, our aunts, our uncles, our grocery store checkers, our law enforcement workers, our, people from all parts of our lives are the people that we are seeing experiencing homelessness and housing instability. So these are individuals, and every single one is different and requires a different solution to help them move from their housing instability or homelessness back to safe, stable, affordable housing. We recognize that housing and homelessness are deeply intertwined with a number of other issues, such as substance use treatment programs not having enough capacity at times, domestic violence contributing to homelessness, people living on fixed incomes, physical health issues. All of these there's many things that are part of that sort of frayed social safety net that I talked about as sort of the compounding factor around the economic issues that cause homelessness. Our division doesn't have control over most of those factors, and sometimes that's frustrating to us. We wish we did, but we typically try to focus our efforts around the things that we do have span of control over, which are housing units and shelter. So we try to work to address creating more housing and more programs that help people make that transition. And we know what works to help people get back into stable housing. We need to immediately provide temporary emergency housing for people. We need to then help them work with their barriers to regain housing in connection to resources. We know that we can assist them to move back into stable housing that's affordable to them on a long-term basis. Some people need help to stay housed, and we need to expand the supply of affordable housing. And that assumption of what we know works to help people move from homelessness and back to housing stability is outlined in our homeless crisis response and housing plan. This is the plan that I talked about being a huge community effort to develop periodically. It was last updated in 2019. We had originally intended to work on an update again this year, but we've learned that the state is working on their strategic plan this year, and we're going to wait to see what the state strategic plan outlines before we work on our plan so that we can make sure that they're consistent. Sometimes the state mandates that we have to include certain things in our plans, and we want to make sure that we know what those things are before we move forward with updating our plan. So our plan outlines sort of 5 primary goals for our homeless crisis response system, which is to make homelessness rare so that as few people as possible experience it, to make homelessness brief so that once somebody does experience homelessness, it's a relatively short amount of time before they're able to move back into stable housing, that people don't fall back into homelessness once they've had that experience and gotten back to stable housing. Let's make sure we can support them to stay stably housed. We always are looking at continuous process improvement. How can we constantly improve the way that we provide assistance to people? And then there's always more work to be done around community engagement. This is one of the biggest challenges that we face, and I'm sure many of you experience this as well, that we don't have alignment with everybody in our community about the best strategies to address homelessness, and that can sometimes cause conflict and discontent. I always like to, I get a lot of calls from the public about homelessness, and I always joke that like 1/3 of the people are mad at us for not doing enough to help people experiencing homelessness, and 1/3 of the people are mad at us for not for doing too much to help people experiencing homelessness. They think we should not do some of the things that we're doing, and then 1/3 of the people are upset because we're not doing the right things. So pretty much, there's a lot of disagreement about how to move forward with homelessness. And, this plan outlines sort of our strategies, broadly, the goals, strategies, and action steps that we want to take as our strategic plan moving forward. So this is a graphic that I often use to kind of try to describe what our homeless crisis response system looks like in a sort of foundational level. So as I mentioned, when somebody's experiencing housing crisis, they are directed to go to our coordinated entry program, which is called the Housing Solutions Center. The Housing Solutions Center does an intake assessment, vulnerability screening, and then a referral out to the most appropriate resource that household needs. Whenever possible, we try to divert people or prevent people from experiencing homelessness. So that can look like non-housing assistance or some kind of eviction prevention. If that's not possible, or we have somebody who's already literally homeless, the goal is to get them into immediate temporary housing, which is a shelter or transitional housing or treatment or medical respite. From shelter, from that temporary housing, we are able to help people get stabilized enough to do a better assessment of their barriers to housing stability. Do they have behavioral health challenges? Do they have credit issues? Do they have challenges with employment? Do they, what is it that they need that will help them be able to maintain stable housing? And for some people, and I kind of group people into three big categories, and I hate to do that, but it's sort of a useful way for us to think about the types of housing that we need in our community. So we have people who have long-term physical and behavioral health issues. And for those folks, we generally believe that what we call permanent supported housing is the right approach. This is a permanent rental subsidy, or they only pay a very small portion of their income, and they receive typically on-site supportive services to help them manage their behavioral health and physical health issues. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the beautiful new Pendleton Place apartment building in Bremerton, and that is a permanent supported housing project, and we need a lot more of those. There's a relatively large group of people who don't have a physical or permanent behavioral health issue. They just need some temporary assistance to help them get back on their feet. So they might need a graduated rental subsidy. So as their income increases, they pay less and less until they're on their own again. They typically need some case management to help them get connected with resources and find ways to increase their income through education or benefits qualification or whatever it is that will be able to increase their income so that they can be self-sustaining in their housing. And then the third group is folks who are typically older or on a fixed income, and they don't really have a trajectory back to independent self-sustaining housing. And what they really need is a permanent rental subsidy or housing that they can afford on their incomes. So, this is the perfect world, right? In a perfect world, we'd have the system that worked and functioned seamlessly. But the reality is that we do not have enough of any of these resources in our community. And I do believe that if we did have enough resources, we would be able to do a much better job making this system all work. But the resources, we are operating in a resource-constrained crisis response system. It's kind of like if the firefighters were only given enough water to fight half of the fires that they're expected to put out. Our homeless crisis response system has been chronically underfunded, and it is extremely challenging to make those decisions on a day-to-day basis. Who do we help and who do we not help? The people that we help, awesome, and we know what to do, and many of them are be successfully rehoused. The folks we don't have enough resources to help, those are the ones that we're seeing more and more frequently on the streets and in our communities who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, because we simply don't have the resources to help them, and we don't have the right kinds of housing that they need. So I talked a little bit about this sort of the centerpiece, the glue for our homeless crisis response system, which is the Housing Solutions Center operated by Kitsap Community Resources. This is a coordinated entry program, and as I said, they do an intake, assessment, vulnerability screening, and then referral to shelters and services. Any person experiencing homelessness in our county is directed to go to the Housing Solutions Center as their first point of entry. And they make all of the shelter referrals with a few exceptions, but they generally make all of the shelter referrals and many of the housing referrals out to the community. All of this would not be possible without all of you, the Housing and Homelessness Coalition. You are the backbone on which our entire homeless crisis response system is built, and all of the work that each of you does in your organizations is absolutely critical to us being able to really wrap our hands around addressing homelessness. I like to say Kitsap County's superpower is our partnerships. And I deeply believe that Kitsap County is a uniquely sized and positioned county to be big enough to have resources and small enough that we can all work together. And we have been able to do really remarkable things because of the partnerships that we've developed and all of the organizations that participate in the Housing and Homelessness Coalition and have a mission that aligns with our homeless crisis response system. So I just want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you. None of this would be possible without your work. So all of the work that you're doing is incredibly important in the sort of base homeless crisis response system as we know it. In addition to that, the county has been working with partners on some other initiatives, much of it funded with pandemic response money, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I wanted to cover just some newer initiatives that we've been working on. As you know, during the pandemic, we were able to stand up an additional 150 beds through partnerships with the Kitsap Rescue Mission and the Salvation Army. As of today, those beds are still operating, but we are anticipating the Salvation Army will be closing their temporary shelter program at the end of April. We're also working on our South Kitsap new shelter project, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is going to add 75 permanent new shelter beds. We got some additional funding from the state for emergency motel program. And what that does is it tries to acknowledge that building new shelter beds really quickly is not likely to happen. So let's leverage hotel units that have willing hotel owners or motel owners. So let us rent some of their rooms and essentially use them as shelter. So we contracted an additional $500 to Kitsap Community Resources to help convert some motel rooms temporarily into shelter beds. We also were able to get an additional grant from the state for increasing our move-in assistance. So one of the biggest barriers we find for that group of people who just need some temporary help is the huge amount of money that they need to move back into housing. You know, you need a first month, last month, and damage deposit. That can be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And so we decided to increase the amount of funding available in the community for that move-in assistance. And that has been tremendously helpful. That was an additional $2 million a year, also to Kitsap Community, through Kitsap Community Resources. We've also been able to operate the Kitsap Eviction Prevention Assistance Program, or KEPA, with the help of many organizations on this call. We've spent almost $30 million now during the course of the pandemic to house 3,600 households, to keep 3,600 households housed and not evicted by helping them pay back rent to landlords and then a little bit of future rent. That program is currently not taking people off of the wait list, but we still do have a little bit of money left, and we're working on spending that through partnerships with Kitsap Legal Services and Dispute Resolution Center and Northwest Justice Project. So people who are actively being evicted are able to access that funding to work out negotiated settlements with landlords so that we can hopefully, again, prevent eviction. I'm also really excited about the Foster Youth Independence Voucher Program. This is a partnership between Department of Youth, Family, and Children at the state level, Bremerton Housing Authority, Olive Crest, Kitsap Community Resources, Kitsap County, and the OESD and Workforce, all providing a network of services that come around youth who are transitioning out of foster care and into stable housing. We've been able to leverage some HUD vouchers specifically for foster youth, pair that with case management, move-in assistance, connection with employment. All of these things have really come together to help. I think we're coming up on like high teens of foster, almost 20 foster youth have gotten assistance so far, and I'm just super excited about that program. The commissioners, the county commissioners also in 2021 approved a new small increase to sales tax, so 0.1%, that's dedicated specifically for affordable housing. That grant program, we've recently hired a new person in a full-time county position to manage that program. So you might be hearing a bit from Joel Warren about the CIA program, the Community Investments in Affordable Housing. We've been working really closely to streamline the availability of this funding with our other capital county grant programs, so that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for affordable housing developers to be able to access this additional funding and pair it with other county and state resources. So there'll be more information coming out about that very shortly as we kind of roll out the traditional coordinated grant process. And we estimate $5 to $6 million being available annually for more affordable housing in our county. So that's super exciting. We've also been really digging into racial equity work. We have a countywide racial equity and homelessness analysis that we did right before the pandemic. And our plan includes some action steps to begin to address housing injustice. We have requirements that all of our homeless providers have some racial equity training, some good training provided through the state. We have racial equity targets for providing assistance. And we have done some awesome partnerships with organizations that are run by members of the communities that they represent. Sometimes we call these by and for organizations, and they have been just tremendous partners in our Kitsap Eviction Prevention Assistance Program, making sure that people in historically underserved and marginalized communities are aware of these programs and have assistance applying for the funding. I wanted to talk a little bit about the HEART program, the Homeless Encampment Action Response Transitions Team. This is a new program that started in April of 2022, designed to specifically address encampments on county-owned public property. All of the other programs that I've talked about are countywide. They include people living in all of the cities and unincorporated Kitsap County. The HEART program is specifically has jurisdiction only over properties that are managed by Kitsap County, because we don't have jurisdictional authority to take action on city-owned public property. So this is one of the programs that is for unincorporated Kitsap County specifically. The county adopted a new policy to specifically respond to encampments on public property, and we hired a position to implement this. Many of you may know Jared Moran, who is the coordinator for the program and amazing at developing partnerships and going out into the community to connect with people. We also funded a new dedicated encampment outreach team that works closely with Jared and the Housing Solutions Center. And sometimes when there is availability through the emergency motel program, we're able to help people in encampments transition into EMP, hotel units, or other shelters. We've been having a lot of success actually partnering lately with the Kitsap Crisis Response Crisis Triage Center that, I'm getting that right, I'm sorry, Kitsap sponsored drug treatment program in getting people from encampments into drug treatment programs right away. So that's very exciting new development, and they are hiring a new person who's specifically working to be that liaison. And then we also have some awesome outreach team members who are part of the REAL program, which is sponsored through another county program and is hosted through Agape and West End Treatment Center. So we went from having no, professional outreach staff that are, hired at the county level to having quite a few during in the last year, and that's just awesome. We just published a new report for the HEART program, and it's on the HEART webpage, summarizing the accomplishments of the HEART program over the last year. So take a look. So last, I want to talk about the Pacific Building Shelter Project. So this is a project that came out of the recognition that we needed a lot of new permanent shelter beds all across Kitsap County, in every community in Kitsap County. We did a countywide search for property or buildings that would be suitable. The one that we found at the time that was the best fit was a the Olympic Fitness Building in Port Orchard on Mile Hill Drive. And we purchased this building and have been working since then to convert it to a 75-bed homeless shelter. It's included a number of health and safety upgrades and ADA upgrades. The building itself was really well situated to be turned into a homeless shelter because it already had big spaces and a lot of bathrooms and showers, but it's needed a surprising amount of systems upgrades, a new roof, a sprinkler system, a new HVAC system, all of that stuff. So it's been taking quite a while to get all of that organized. Here you can see the exterior of the building. It's on a beautiful wooded lot with a lot of parking. And there's already some large spaces that will really work well for the project. It's designed to hold up to 75 guests, and that will include families with children, singles, and couples. We will be allowing animals, and that is a very exciting part of the project. It's called a co-sheltering model where animals and people are sheltering together. So some of the design of the project has been around trying to incorporate spaces that can accommodate animals as well, because we know that people who are experiencing homelessness sometimes have a furry family member, and they do not want to be separated from their furry family member, who's often their support system, in order to go into housing. And so we wanted to lower that barrier and provide a shelter space that allows for animals as well. And we apparently are on the cutting edge of this, because all across the country, we are finding more and more organizations and groups that are reaching out to us and saying, oh my gosh, what you're doing, this is great. We want to do a lot more of this across the state and the country. How can we do more of this? So we're developing a lot of connections across the country. And then also we have a great dedicated group of veterinarians and people who are very supportive of this concept, who are helping with the co-sheltering aspect of the Pacific Building Shelter. This is going to be a residential style shelter where guests can stay for a while, long stay. People aren't going to be lining up at the door. It's not a drop-in shelter. They'll receive everything that they need for safety and stability, in addition to having connections with services on site, such as medical assistance, mental health, substance use treatment, job placement. All of that is through a number of community partner organizations who will be part of the project as well. And of course, people will get case management for stability planning, because the goal is for people to be there as short a time as possible and make that transition into permanent housing as quickly as they're able. We are intending to contract the work out. So the county will be the landlord and own the building, but we are intending to contract the work out. And our intention is to contract with Kitsap Rescue Mission to be the provider of the services. Oh, I already said all of this stuff. I think I didn't say that we do anticipate being able to accommodate up to 20 animals. So, 10 to 12 dogs and 8 to 10 cats or rabbits or ferrets or those kinds of smaller animals. So right now we're in the permitting phase of the project. We are getting ready to submit some additional information for our land use permit. And so we're really excited that one is getting closer than ever to being completed. We've secured funding for the project, although we may need to find a little more funding as things have gotten more expensive since we started the project. We have an architect and engineer who's helped us develop all of the permit submittals, and we've actually submitted all the permits, the main permits for the project, and now we're just waiting for those to get approved. And then we will quickly move into hiring a general contractor to do the actual construction work. We're also working with Kitsap Transit on a transportation plan to make sure that people who are staying in the shelter will be able to get to employment and connection with resources. And as I said, we'll be shortly, hopefully, crossing my fingers, putting this out for a bid for general contracting and construction. There's a great project website. You can check out information about the project. There's a frequently asked questions, and there will be an official public comment period during that conditional use permit process. We don't have a date yet for the hearings examiner, but once we do, we'll be publishing that and making sure that everybody's aware that that's an opportunity for public comment on the use of the property for a homeless shelter. As I mentioned before, we do have a robust set of web pages off of the county general website. You can find information there about everything that I've talked about, as in addition to our recently published annual report for 2021, where we show all the funding that we got for the county for homelessness and how we spent the money and what were the results of that funding in 2021. We also publish periodic performance reports. We're just working now on our 2022 reports. It takes a while to round up all the data and get everybody to turn in the reports and analyze it, and then produce some reports. But you can find a lot of information on our website, and we have a short URL for it, kcowa.us/housing will get you to the website that has all of this information. There's so much that I didn't talk about. I didn't mention our awesome severe weather shelter programs. I didn't, dive deep into Project Connect. There's a lot more data and demographic information on about people experiencing homelessness. There's statistics around how many people are getting housed every year, all of that. Happy to come back and talk to you about any one of those things more in depth. If you're an organization that is seeking some data that you want to help you write a grant or analyze something, we are happy to provide that. We have awesome Corey Derenberger on our staff, who's our data whiz, and he can help point you towards data that we already have, or even crunch some numbers on an unlimited basis if there's something that you're specifically looking for. So we are very happy to engage and just honored to be part of this awesome coalition. And with that, I know I've provided you with more information than you probably thought you could take in short period. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Kristen, you do have a couple of questions in chat.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to read them if you're not able to access them at the moment.
Okay, so I'm seeing from Raylina, Kirsten, is your department able to fund or partner with medical respite providers, addiction services? I understand that Kitsap County is not utilizing the Housing Trust Fund. How can we change that? We are able to partner with medical respite. Sometimes the tricky thing about medical respite is that those shelter beds don't function the same way as the rest of our shelter beds function. So they have sometimes time limits on them, and oftentimes medical respite beds are actually funded through partnerships with hospitals or medical providers because they're seen as a way to reduce the hospital cost to keep people. So Benedict House is a men's shelter that also has some awesome resource of some medical respite beds that are funded through a medical provider. As to your question about the Housing Trust Fund, that's a great question. Our county has received trust fund money in the past. I'm sure that Pendleton Place has some trust fund money in it. And I know that there's been a couple of recent applications just this year to the Housing Trust Fund. One of the interesting things that's happened is that the Housing Trust Fund has started an experiment where they set aside a certain amount of funding by different regions in the state. So instead of our projects competing with all the other projects across the state, they've said, we're going to try a thing where we set aside a certain proportion of the funding for Kitsap, Jefferson, Clallam counties, and you're only competing against those counties for funding for this one type of Housing Trust Fund funding. And so that's something that's very encouraging because I think it's going to mean that we are able to do more success in getting Housing Trust Fund dollars coming to our county. And there's a couple of great projects right now that are trying to get that funding. The next question is, why is HSC not out in the community? Many people are not going to come into an office. great question. And this is why we this year have funded a new dedicated outreach team through Housing Solutions Center. Two awesome people that go out into encampments and streets every single day, trying to help people. They take HSC applications with them, and they try to get people to complete those applications, and they try to act as a conduit of information between where they are on the street and the resources. So I'm happy to say that we too have recognized that that might be an issue and are really working to create that connection. Sandra is asking for the name of the staff member who can help with data. That is Corey Durenberger, and his email has been put in the chat. Thank you, everybody. Great. I'm trying to see, so there's a suggestion that outreach workers join some of the feeding programs. I know that they do already work closely with Northwest Hospitality. There again, it's unfortunately one of those resource constraint issues. I think we could probably do with having a lot more outreach teams, but we have to take this limited amount of money that we have and figure out how we're going to spend it for the best benefit of our community. So some of it we spend on outreach teams, some we spend on shelter, some on transitional, some on, youth shelter. Like, we really do our best to kind of come up with the right portfolio so that we're having our resources that we do have spread across the different needs. But I am the first to admit that we do not have enough resources to help everybody who needs it, or to even provide all the kinds of programs that we could definitely use in the community.
Kirsten, can I follow up on the Housing Solutions Center question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so thank you for whoever asked that. Sorry I didn't catch the name, but so HSC has 4 outreach workers. So Kirsten talked about 2 with the HEART team, and then we also have 2 that are 1/10 funded through our ROAST program, and they mainly focus on treatment centers and sometimes jail, but really recovery, because there's a strong mental health and substance use component. And we really do our best to try to work with a lot of different agencies. So if some of the feeding folks, or if there's groups that aren't connected, please reach out to us and we can try to walk through what that would look like to try to get outreach folks. Because Kirsten's right, we have more outreach than we ever have, but it also still is not enough. But definitely we're very open to partnering with folks if you are interested. And about the Housing Trust Fund, I will say, for KCR's The Mills Crossing project that we talked about last time, that's about half permanent supportive housing and half affordable housing. We did apply for Housing Trust Fund for most of the money for the Salish region to try to get money from Housing Trust Fund. I know one of the big critiques you're probably talking about is overall Housing Trust Fund has money that doesn't each year necessarily doesn't come into Kitsap, but it's not for, there are folks that we're trying to get that money to Kitsap, but again, it is a competitive, but we'll see how this Salish region kind of works, going forward, as Kirsten talked. Thank you, Kirsten. Sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. I love it when people add more knowledge. I'm definitely in my communications with the state, giving them very positive feedback about the regional appropriation approach. They did it as a pilot experiment with one sort of pot of Housing Trust Fund funding that was specifically for rapid acquisition. And so my hope is that they'll expand that and do more of that going forward, because we want an equitable distribution of this trust fund funding across the state, right? And it sometimes is hard to compete with much more experienced developers who, have full-time developer grant writers and have more capacity to leverage more funding. So I'm super excited about that. There was a question about whether you could get copies of the presentation. Absolutely. I will put it into PDF and send it over to Lisa and Priya to distribute. No problem. There's Helen's also talking about Bremerton City Council and the new ordinance. I don't know that I'm familiar with that new ordinance. I'm happy to learn more about it. The Blake decision that you're referring to is the state court case that decriminalized drug possession, and that in combination with some law enforcement reform that happened at the state level has created a very complex situation for law enforcement to be able to take action when they see people who are doing drugs or possessing drugs. It's definitely has a big intersection with housing and homelessness, and it's definitely made it much more complicated to know what to do in some situations. As I said, we're forging better partnerships that can help people get right into drug treatment programs, but they have to want to go. We do not have laws that compel people to go into drug treatment programs. And so if folks experiencing homelessness are not interested in doing treatment at that time, we don't have a way to compel them to do that. And I know that can be frustrating sometimes for folks, but that is the current state of, not sure that I would even advocate for compulsory drug treatment. I'm just saying that sometimes that gets proposed as a solution, and I'm here to tell you that is illegal right now. We cannot make people go into drug treatment. So yeah, and meeting them where they are isn't jail. Yeah, it's such a complicated situation with law enforcement and jail and homelessness and treatment and then when people are done with treatment, they need a stable place to be housed so that they can maintain their sobriety. And that can be challenging as well, to have enough housing for people who are making that transition from treatment into permanent housing. So again, we just don't have enough of that to help everybody who needs it. Thank you, Helen. Great to see you. Any other questions for me at this point? Wanted to point, just going through the chat here really quick and make sure I haven't missed anything. Just wanted to give a shout out to the awesome Housing and Homelessness Division team who's here. Virginia McCaslin has assumed responsibility for a lot of the homeless housing and affordable housing grants that fund the backbone of our homeless crisis response system. She is your primary contact for most of those kinds of grants, as well as the KEPA grants. Leah is the person, Leah Nolden is awesome behind the scenes, processing reimbursement requests, helping with contracts. If you're an organization who has a grant, you're likely talking to Leah about reimbursement requests and how to make sure that you're getting paid by the county for the work that you're doing. And then Corey Derenberger, who I mentioned before, is our amazing data guru. And he also does a lot of our reporting for all of the state and federal and local reporting requirements for all of our grants, our beautiful annual report. And he does a lot of the compilation of our statistics and data. So we're super grateful for him. And then we have Jared Moran, who is our heart coordinator, and he is charged with doing the management of that program and doing a lot of outreach and addressing of encampments, coordinating county efforts around encampment response, and also building relationships with the state around DNR property, the state around right-of-way property, and also, lending assistance when requested to the There's a question, does any of the current plan for funds include supportive housing? Yes, absolutely. The new community investments in affordable housing funding specifically calls out supportive housing as an allowable use of funds. And the existing CDBG and home funding is also able to be used for supportive housing for new construction. So absolutely, that is a huge priority. Since there's not enough shelters, could people be allowed to self-govern in tent cities? That is definitely something that other communities have been experimenting with. At this point, we don't have any sanctioned tent cities or safe campsites in the county or in any of the cities that I'm aware of. Definitely worth more conversation. I think there's a lot of complexity in finding an appropriate location for that. And then we need an organization that wants to take on the kind of management and operations of that. But if there's an organization out there that's interested in doing that, please contact me and I'd be happy to chat with you more. I'm guessing I'm out of time, Lisa.
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Kirsten. We will try and get the slides out to everyone. And thank you to your team. It's nice that you guys help navigate all the funding and supports and allocations in our county. Much appreciation to you. Kirsten, don't leave just yet because I wanted to acknowledge Project Connect, and Kirsten coordinated that team. She gathered that team to implement it this year. I'm aware that Shannon Turner and also Terry Schroeder were part of that team. I think there were more than that. Kirsten, can you just share who those people were, and we can acknowledge and celebrate that work for a successful Project Connect. And then if for just a few minutes, maybe we can reflect and talk about what worked and maybe what we could improve for the next Project Connect round.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't come prepared with a list of all of the amazing people who participated there was a really robust planning group that met every 2 weeks for months to get this all organized. And I apologize, I don't have the names of everybody on top of my head, but as you mentioned, Terry Schroeder was instrumental. Shannon Turner was the chair of the group and did an amazing job. There's many other people that I'm going to miss. So I apologize, I don't have everybody's name, but a lot of people did a lot of things. We had site coordinators. Roland Arper was amazing in South Kitsap, getting that Project Connect together. And then really all of you who, Eric Harold was amazing at making things run smoothly at Salvation Army. Sorry, I'm watching this terribly, but all of the partner organizations that came to the event to set up tables and provide resources were just, it was like such a great Project Connect. And I was so pleased, especially because I felt like we were really rusty. We didn't remember how to do it. We were we're kind of like, oh, I think we remember, but it's been a couple of years. And, we had great support from the Housing Solutions Center team. And there was just, everybody kind of pitched in and scratched our memory banks and tried to remember what we'd done. And it all just came out really, really well. I think we had the best attendance we've had in the past at the North Kitsap and South Kitsap events. And then we had a similar attendance as we had the last time we did it at the Bremerton event. So it went really, really well. All our vendors said they were really pleased with who they were able to not only provide services to, but also that they were able to reconnect with a lot of their fellow service providers and, have new staff meet each other and kind of find out what new programs are going on. And so it was a really amazing networking event in addition to being a connection with resources for people who were lower income. So huge thanks, huge kudos to everybody. It takes a community, it takes a village, and it was amazing what we pulled off. I think next year, we'll have a much better idea of what we're doing and maybe start planning even a little earlier and things will go even more smoothly. But I really can say, more gratitude for how it all went and everybody pulled together and did amazing.
Thank you. I would just invite anyone, if they had input, positive or things to improve that you noted as an experience as a vendor or a site host, you can add it in the chat and we'll try and incorporate that into the notes. by observation and participation. I thought it was really good. Something that I observed, Kirsten, was a lot of Spanish speakers and mom speakers. And it's just so hard to always have an available translator. And so that's something that I noted. But just really changed my view on resource fairs. Sometimes I can be a cynic, and it was a very good one. So just thanks to all the people that supported that. And again, any of you who participated, please do share any input in the chat. Okay, we're going to shift on to agency updates. I'm going to start though. I forgot. Bridget, I cued you to approve the previous month's notes, and then I just like spaced on out and went to the next thing. So I'm going to share the screen briefly to review the minutes or notes from last month. And then I just need a first and a second to approve, and then we'll get those posted as well. So here we are. Last month, we had a presentation on the Working Families Tax Credit. We discussed Project Connect and the point in time count. We had some good updates from Kirsten and team. We had an update about Salvation Army from Eric Harold, and several other updates from the coalition members.
All right, this is Bridget Glasspool, and I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. And can I have a second?
This is Priya. I'll second.
Thank you. And thanks, Priya, for those excellent notes every month. Okay. Agency updates. If you have an update to share, please type your name in the chat and your agency, and I'll call on you on the order they are received. And while those are populating, I'm going to share one update that was shared from Life Lutheran Church that is located across the road from Olenex Ridge Elementary School. They have a food bank located on the lower part of their building. They are an emergency food bank open only on Saturday from 9 to 1 p.m. And clients can come in once a month for groceries. On the premises each Saturday, they have an RN able to reach out to any people who may have a clinical need. Their program serves as a link to broader services such as those listed in our resource guide. And again, that is the Spirit of Life Lutheran Church across from Olenex Ridge Elementary in South Kitsap. Okay, Michelle, J-Row, you have a agency update to share. The floor is yours.
Yes, hello everyone. I just wanted to let you know that I'm with Kitsap Transit. I'm the customer service manager. And I wanted to let you know that our executive director has made a proposal to the board for Sunday service to return. So I'm going to post a link in the chat to our latest blog that kind of lays it out, but his idea would be a phased in approach starting in August for different areas, all the way through next February, implementing them. And the idea would be that there would be like some trunk routes, you know, some of the main routes that would be going. It would be pretty limited service to start, and then some on-demand ride services. But I just wanted to let you know that, you know, it's something that we have to be able to hire enough operators for before we can implement it, but there is a plan out there. And so we're excited about that.
That's really good to hear. Thank you, Michelle. I'm hoping that you can staff drivers as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Matt, you have an update to share.
Yeah, I do. It is with a lot of sadness that I'm announcing I'm stepping down as the Housing and Community Support Director with Kitsap Community Resources. I've had some health challenges that just make it not super optimal to be doing this type of work right now. And so I, really just want to say it's been an honor serving you all. It's been this has been the best job I've ever had, and it's been one of the honors of my life to work with this amazing community. And this is such a special community. So I really just wanted to thank everyone. You all are so wonderful and amazing, and helped supported us and our team. And so I just wanted to make sure everyone knows the gratitude that I have for you all and the coalition. But I am happy to announce that Carla Foster, who is, as many of you know, is our Rent Assistance Programs Manager, is stepping in as interim director. And so if you, going forward, she will, in this next kind of transition period, be leading the division, and you can definitely reach out to her with any questions. My last day is next Friday, so I'll still be around for about another week and a half, but just want to make sure everyone knows Carla, and I'll have her come up right now and just say hello.
Thank you, Matt. We will miss you very much, and we're looking forward to seeing Carla, and best of luck to you. Is this Carla?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Carla. Hello.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for saying hi. Tag you're it.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and Carla, Carla's been voluntold to take the vice chair position as the executive. So I know she'll do a great job working with you. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, Matt. And I'll reach out to you, Carla. We appreciate all your team does at KCR. Jason, the floor is yours. Agency update. Oh, Jason, I think we have a sound issue. Not yet. Jason, I'll shift to the next person and I'll come back to you. Teresa.
Hi there, Housing Kitsap. We actually have exhausted one of our wait lists at Kingston Ridge, and I've sent it out to some of you guys that we have a 2-bedroom tax credit available for applications. It is still available for applications. There are some pretty very specific eligibility requirements for it, but it is a non-subsidized 2-bedroom, 2-bath tax credit unit going for $11.92 per month. I'll drop my email into the chat. Reach out to me if you're interested or have a client that's interested in applying for it, and then we can take the steps together.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm coming back to you, Jason. Nuts. I'm not sure what that means. Can you type in the chat? Thanks. Well, Jason's chatting. Priya, library updates.
Yes, I just wanted to give a reminder. I know that some of you are aware that the library hosts the AARP tax aids throughout the county. This year, we're hosting them in our Poulsbo and Bainbridge locations. So if you have folks in those areas who need free tax support, they can help you file your taxes. There are different requirements for that, and I'm trying to pull up the website here so I can share that. And aside, I'll put the link in the chat. And aside from the AARP locations at a couple library branches. We also have tax forms in our branches. So if any of your clients or people you work with need any tax forms, we can either hand them off immediately or we can print them off depending on which forms they have. So just keep us in mind if your clients or community members need support with that, because tax season is here. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thanks.
Thank you, Priya, for sharing that. I am going to come back to Jason. Jason, I'm just going to read so everyone knows. Kitsap Aging and Long-Term Care has a senior resource fair this Saturday at the Silverdale Library. If you don't know, that library just opened in a beautiful new remodeled building at Central Kitsap High School. So go check out the fair in the library, and Jason reports that there will be a number of other organizations present. So another way to get good information out to seniors or those who are getting long-term care. Kirsten sent a reminder that the severe weather shelters are open. Check in 6 to 9, gather together to grow together is providing rides if needed. And you can find that information in several places, but you can also find it on the Housing and Homelessness Coalition page. So keep that in mind. It's been pretty cold the last 3 evenings. I'm grateful that they are open. Okay. I think I've got everybody. Are there any last updates? Okay, Grace from PCAP reports that they are happy to receive referrals. If you have someone you would like to refer, contact Linda Seeger, and we will have that contact information in the notes that we hope to get out soon. I also have a reminder to everyone that next month we will meet in person at the Norm Dick Center. We are going to do a take two to celebrate the Kitsap Housing and Homelessness Coalition Awards. There was lots of great work to celebrate, and it will be nice to gather in person and just to connect with each other and less Zoom formalized way. Marwan Cameron of Gather Together, Grow Together is going to support some light catering. So there will be coffee and cookies if you're compelled by sugar, but hopefully you're compelled by good company. And we really want to celebrate the work. Like, as an observer of the coalition and a participant, I think like the work can be challenging. And so as much as we can support each other and lift each other up, like the more resilient we can be with some of the tough things that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So please do remember March 15th at 2 p.m., Norm Dick's. We are meeting in person. It will also be hybrid. So if you are not able to travel, like you can still participate in that way. But I've got to say, sometimes hybrid as a virtual participant can be weird. So if you can, try to be there in person. With that, I want to extend thanks to Jason Driver and also to Kirsten Jewell for that excellent information. Many well wishes to you, Matt, and thanks to all of you for being here today. Have a good afternoon and see you next month.